Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and today I want to share with you the resources that we have used in order to put together our astronomy main lesson blocks and astronomy unit studies. Now, because this is a unit study that we have done several times in the past, I also have a number of main lesson books to share with you, and I'm going to share with you these main lesson blocks at the end of this video. I have a number of projects that we have done as well. Some of them have videos, but most of them don't. So I'm going to set these aside, and if you're interested, you can take a look at these at the end of the video. So the first thing I want to show you is the curriculum that we are going to be using for the main lesson block portion of this unit study. Now, if I am putting together a main lesson block, I will refer to the live education curriculum as a guide so that I can build my main lesson block around this curriculum. But if I'm putting together a unit study, I will just build my unit study around books and other resources. So for the first part of this astronomy main lesson block, we are going to be referring to the curriculum almost exclusively. There are a couple of other resources that I use in addition to this curriculum, but for the very first section, we really only just needed the curriculum. And so this one is set up into two different sections, and the first one is based on studying the constellations. So you don't need too many additional resources to do that because the curriculum comes packed with all the mythologies about the different constellations that are going to be taught, as well as drawings that you can use in order to copy into your main lesson book. The second section has a bit more math and a bit more astronomy. And this section is really fantastic, but if you've got a young sixth grader, then I would recommend saving that part until their student is a little bit older. For this unit, I also picked up a new main lesson book, and this one has the white pages for your written narration, but then it has the blue pages to do your constellations. Now, this is the first time we used this main lesson book, and I absolutely love it. It was such a great addition to this unit, and I'm going to show you my son's main lesson book at the end of this video. So I have a little confession to make. I really had intended to put this video up before we actually dove into this main lesson block, but we just didn't have the time. So we're actually done with this 3-week main lesson block. So I'll be able to show you his work as well as have a more complete review of the materials that we used for this portion of the main lesson block. So let me put these aside and show you the books that we used. Okay, so for the main lesson block, we used only about 2 or 3 other resources. The first one that we used is this Geology and Astronomy book by Charles Kovacs. Charles Kovacs was a Waldorf teacher in Scotland. He's since passed away, but his notes, his extensive notes on each of his lessons were collected and then published as these books. There are many in the series, and I have to say that they are fantastic. I absolutely love them. I'm so glad that I went ahead and I purchased all that I could find even before using this first one, and I am so pleased with them so far. We've already done the geology and most of the astronomy. There were a couple of lessons that we didn't get to because this was a shorter unit. This beginning part was a shorter unit. And we've already started on the Ancient Greece book by Charles Kovacs. They're fantastic. They're really great. And I think that they would make a great basis to any main lesson block or unit study. So we use this book by reading 1 chapter every day to go along with our live education Waldorf curriculum. Now, my student didn't have to do any written narration for this. We only did written narration and the drawings of the constellations based on the live education curriculum. But we went ahead and we read this. I read this aloud, and it also was an opportunity for us to discuss the content. So even though these chapters are really short, and they don't contain too much information, they would take a while to get through because we would talk about the content. Another book that we used was the Book of Greek Myths, and there are several different books that you can use. We just happen to have this one as well as a few others, and this is the one that we referred to as we were doing our astronomy unit. Now, we decided to go just from the start and just read these stories through because we are following this astronomy unit with a unit on ancient Greece, and so this kind of gets us into that unit as well. So we use this book, but there are definitely other books that you can use, and using a book on Roman or Greek mythology works really well when you are learning about the constellations. I have a couple of picture books that we used as well, though we did not use them to coincide with this unit. I do have them with this unit. They work perfectly with an astronomy unit, but we actually read them before we began our unit. So these are a few picture books that we've picked up recently. This one is on Astronaut Scott Kelly, and it's a really nicely written, beautiful picture book that also includes photographs of this astronaut's life. I really like the way that it's written. It's very engaging, very interesting. And if you wanted to approach your astronomy unit from the astronauts and astronomers, I think that would make a really great way to bring a human component into your unit. The other book that we have that I really like is called On a Beam of Light. This is the story of Albert Einstein, and I really like the way that this book is written. It's not a heavy book. It really brings these large concepts down to like the very basics so that children can understand it, and even adults who may struggle with understanding these concepts totally understand it by reading this picture book. I think picture books are really overlooked when it comes to content. I think they are fabulous for teaching all kinds of subject areas because I feel like they're really beautifully illustrated, number one, and they bring the content down in a story form that's really relatable for both students, young students, and adults. So we really enjoyed this book. We read it often outside of our astronomy unit. A few other books that we wanted to do but we didn't, but I think would be really valuable for this astronomy main lesson block are these books. Along Came Galileo. This is by Jean Bendick, and I really like these books a lot. They're written in a very wonderful manner. It's very easy to read. They're very captivating. They're a quick read. They're not too heavy, and we've just learned a lot from these kinds of books. We have a couple more picture books. We have Margaret and the Moon, How Margaret Hamilton Saved the First Lunar Landing. And this is another great picture book that's also really inspirational, especially if you have young girls and you want to get them inspired to study or learn about the sciences. I think that this book is fabulous. Look Up, Henrietta Leavitt's Pioneer Woman Astronomer. And this is another picture book that has an astronomy theme and a female role model theme. And this is another one that would work really well for an astronomy unit, and it would also work well for studying this time period or as a unit on female role models. And of course, it just makes a great morning, like an opening activity for the morning just to get the day started. Starry Messenger, Galileo Galilei. I really like the astronomer Galileo, and so whenever we can find resource material that is about his life and his discoveries, then we definitely try to add it into our homeschool library. And I found this book at the library bookstore for $1, so I was super excited to add it to our unit, though we have not read it yet, but we intend to read this one when we do the second half of our astronomy main lesson block. The next book I want to show you is the One Small Square books. There are many in this series, and this is the Night Sky book. Now, I really like these books, but I have to say that they have been challenging to incorporate into our main lesson blocks and unit studies. I should mention, however, that a unit study differs from a main lesson block a little bit in that a unit study generally tries to incorporate all of the different subject areas into that specific study, but a main lesson block is more of a concentration of that information for a period of time, generally anywhere from 3 to 9 weeks. And so this book would work well for either a main lesson block or a unit study, but we found it a little bit challenging to incorporate these books, in part because the writing wasn't as engaging as I expected, especially considering how beautifully this book is illustrated. But we give these books a try whenever we have a unit study that these books have information about, but I just wanted to put it out there that they were a little bit more challenging to incorporate than I expected. The Sky is Full of Stars. This is another picture book that's a really easy read that talks about the constellations. And so when we're putting together our unit studies and main lesson blocks, I try to have a number of books that either are books about the astronomers, or picture books, or some kind of a fiction book, and then of course some of the nonfiction books. I just try to kind of round it out so that it not only has a balance of these different kinds of books, but also it can meet the needs of multiple students, since in general I am homeschooling different ages. It's nice to have some picture books in order to have the younger students have something that's really going to be interesting to them. But what's really fantastic about picture books and other material that is initially intended for younger students is that the older students still really enjoy those materials. And while they may not be so apt to pick up a picture book and read it, they definitely don't mind joining when you are reading a picture book to your younger students. So don't overlook some of these more simple books. I think they're fantastic and have a lot of great content. We picked up this book a year ago, and I am not crazy about it. My kids don't really like the way the planets have faces on them. The information is pretty simple and pretty direct, but the illustrations weren't something that we were really crazy about. A few of these books are ones that we picked up from the library bookstore. Whenever I find nonfiction books that coordinate with one of our units, I go ahead and pick them up. What Do You See in the Moon? This one actually turned out to be a really great find because it talks about different cultures and their ideas of what kind of animals were represented in the moon, or the mythology behind the moon, or just the different stories. And I really like this book because it really goes well with our approach to studying the sciences and history. We have Galaxies by Gale Gibbons. This is a scholastic book. I picked this one up from the library bookstore for a quarter, and I was drawn to it for the illustrations. We have not read it yet, but because it coordinates with this topic area, it's in here with this unit. The Book of Planet Earth. This is another one that we picked up from the library bookstore, and this is not something that we will use with our main lesson block, but this is definitely a resource material that I would use for our unit study. Galileo for Kids. Again, really big fan of Galileo, but I am not a big fan of these kinds of books. We have other ones in the series, and what I found was that in general, and though I can't comment specifically on this book, what I found was that the information seemed to go down rabbit holes and go off tangents, and it was really hard for us to stay focused on what the point of the chapter was. So this has a ton of information, and it really puts Galileo in context with whatever is going on at the time in history, at that historical time period. But I found that it was just a little bit too much information, especially the other books that we've read in this series. We have the Marco Polo book, and it's not my #1 resource, but because it was on Galileo, I went ahead and I added it to this unit. Hopefully, when we do the second half of our astronomy unit, we can add this in, and I can give you a better review of this book at that point. We also have a number of posters. I just have one here to show you. Sometimes it's nice to add some of these posters as classroom decorations when you're doing a particular unit. We have other ones as well. The Glow-in-the-Dark Night Sky book. This is another one on constellations, and what's kind of neat about this one is that when you turn out the lights, you can see the constellations because they are glow-in-the-dark, so that's kind of neat. This one has a lot of illustrations, and I don't think it has any written content, so this is one that would be great to use during the season that these constellations are out, or visible rather. The Usborne Internet Linked Book of Astronomy and Space. We used this one the last time we did our astronomy unit, and we referred to this book for the different planets, and this is a really nicely illustrated book. I think we might have used some of the illustrations and drawings as inspiration for our own illustrations, and we definitely used some of the content. It's a nonfiction book. It's not super engaging, but it is still really nice. And if you use the internet linked portion, then you can be directed to other websites and get other information, but we did not use that feature of this book. The next book we have is called Exploring Planet Earth, and this one is completely focused on discoveries that were made about the planet. So beginning with the explorers who circumnavigated the planet all the way up into future explorations. So this is probably not one that we will use for this main lesson block, but it is in here with this astronomy unit, and it might be a focus that you want to do before you start looking out into the stars. Faraway worlds, planets beyond our solar system. This kind of stuff totally captivates my imagination. This is another really fantastic book, but again, this might not be one that we use for this particular unit. I am showing you an abundance of resources so that you can get kind of an idea of the books that we look for when we're putting together our unit studies, but there are a lot of books that are duplicates, like there'll be multiple books on the constellations or multiple books on the mythology or several games that are kind of similar. So I'm going to try to show you the ones that we like best in case you're kind of coming down to choosing between some of these different resources. We can tell you the ones that we really liked and the ones that the kids really especially enjoyed. What Makes Day and Night? This is another book that we picked up from the library bookstore for $1. Since it went along with this unit, we went ahead and added it to it. And it's a really simple, nice picture book, and it has some really practical ideas on how to understand some of the things that I feel are even challenging for us as adults to really grasp as far as our planet and the moon and, you know, things like that. Okay, we have the glow-in-the-dark Zodiac storybook, and this is similar to the other one that we have with the glow-in-the-dark constellations, but this one is nice because it also goes into the mythology and explains how these constellations got their name and the stories behind these different Greek and Roman mythologies. This is Stars and Planets, and this is by Discoveries, and we have a couple other books in this series, and these are okay books. I found that they just kind of gave us the information that we needed, but that was about it. They do have some really nice illustrations and some pictures and captions, but nothing spectacular or special. So if you were looking for just a resource material, something like this would be good. But if you've got really young students, I would suggest the picture books over these kinds of books. And if you have older students, you may need books that have a bit more content than these ones. I feel like these ones give a nice overview, but usually there isn't enough deep content for older students. All right, I have a few more books to show you before we get into the games and the hands-on projects. We have Planets in Our Solar System. So this is another picture book. Again, found this one at the library bookstore. These may not be ones that I would have purchased full price, but considering we got them for $1, I go ahead and add them to our unit study. Find the Constellations is written by the same author who did the Curious George books. We have not used this book yet, but it is all about the constellations, and we intend to add this to our astronomy main lesson block for the second part of it. A book about planets and stars. This is a little bit of an older book, but it ended up having substantial content, and we used it a lot. We referred to it a lot for our last unit that we did on astronomy. Now, we may not use it again for this particular unit, only because our astronomy units ended up coming really close to each other. Usually our units rotate every 4 years because my children are about 4 years apart, but we did this unit about 3 years ago, and so we may not go into it as in depth as we did the last time. Book of Planets. This is another book that we got from the library bookstore for $1. It's not something that I probably would have purchased on my own, only because I feel like a book like this is intended for a young student, but studying the planets is not something that I would put together a main lesson block for a young student. It would be for an older student. So the content is really simple. So if you've got a student that's really into astronomy, then this might be a nice book that he or she could read. But we, of course, have it so that we have a variety of materials, and that's something that my son probably would just read on his own. Even though he's 11, that would take him 5 minutes. It's just nice to have those things available. the universe, more than 100 questions and answers to things you want to know. We have other books in the series like this, and they haven't been worked into our units all that well because the question and answer format is kind of random. Even though it's focused on a particular subject area, I found that it's kind of a novelty, it's kind of interesting to read, but it doesn't really work into our units all that well. We've had this book for so many years, it's just hanging out in our unit study bin, and occasionally it gets read a little bit, but definitely not cover to cover. We have the solar system. This was a booklet that went along with a hands-on project. It was a model of the solar system with the different planets that you can paint. We did this with our previous main lesson block. We really enjoyed it. We got two sets when we did this. I had two students, and so we went ahead and got two different models of the solar system. One of them we really liked, the other one we really didn't like. I'm going to try to find those two products, and you can find them in the description box below if I have located them so that you know the one that we really liked versus the one that we didn't like. I have tried to order it again, but it's been out of stock at one of my favorite vendors, Rainbow Resource. But there are ones that are better than others where you get models that are a little bit more close to being proportionately accurate versus ones that are just all small, if that makes sense. All right, we also have another Osborne internet-linked book, Earth and Space, and I think this is really similar to the last one that we had. We tend to be a family that gets a lot of hand-me-down material that we just kind of start to collect and organize into these different unit study bins. With a book like this, because we have multiple resources that are similar, we're not going to dive into all of them. However, one good thing about having multiple resources that are similar means that you can cross-reference those resource materials and check for specific information, or just even cross-check information and find out if it's the same across these different books, because we've found sometimes that the information does vary a little bit. This was another poster that went along with the solar system model so that you could get some idea of how big the sun was compared to the planets in that little solar system kit. This is another book that we picked up from the library bookstore. It's called Saturn. I especially like books like this where the entire book is dedicated to one planet versus the ones that are a little bit more broad in their focus, because that way you can really get some good content related to the planet of study. Now, in general, with our Waldorf main lesson block, we are not going to do an in-depth study of any of the planets in particular. It's more about the way they travel in the sky, how we see them from planet Earth, and their relationship with the constellations and the other planets. So it's not so much an in-depth study. However, on occasion, we will depart from our Waldorf curriculum and explore topics on our own, and this is a book for that purpose. All right, so this is the kit that we really liked. It's called Our Amazing Solar System, and it was fantastic. So I do not remember the name of the other one, but if you are looking for a good model of the solar system, one where you can paint the different planets, this one is it. It was really, really good, and it's still hanging in our homeschool room. My Book of Space, this is one of the very first books we ever purchased for our homeschool. So we just have some sentimental attachment to this, even though we do not use this one often. If we do use it in our main lesson block or unit study, we tend to use certain sections of it rather than reading it cover to cover. But it's still about this topic area, and that's why it's still here. Having the Constellation Finder is a must if you're going to do an astronomy unit. I personally have a really hard time locating the constellations in the night sky, in part because we live in the suburbs and there is a lot of light pollution, but even so, I've actually found it even more difficult if we go out into the desert or a place that doesn't have light pollution, just because then there are so many stars in the sky and then it's really hard to try to figure out the constellations. So sometimes it's actually easier if you have one of those star finders, like a star finder app on your phone, to kind of help you locate where the constellations are supposed to be, and then you can probably find some of the brighter stars in that constellation. But we have this in here. We attempt this every time this unit rolls around, and we have moderate success at best. All right, I want to show you some of the the games that we use for this unit and beyond this unit, and they make really great opening activities to kind of draw the students into the lesson for the day. So I want to start with a few of the new ones that we have for this unit. This one is called Night Sky Finder, and it is a card game similar to Go Fish. And you have these different groupings that you're trying to collect, like say all the 11s, I think there's like 4 11s and 4 5s and 4 1s or 7s. And you're trying to collect all of these different groups together in order to make a set. So it's similar to Go Fish. But here's what's really nice about them as well, is that, let me try to find two, like multiple cards within the same family. What you'll notice for this family of number 10, which is all about the solar system, the information at the bottom actually is all different, which is really great. So you get multiple opportunities to add a little bit of information to this game, which I really love. So each of these little cards is a little bit different, even though you're looking for all of them in the same family. And I like that opportunity for a fun and education at the same time. Plus, they're really beautifully illustrated. And something that's kind of neat and different is that they are these long cards rather than the regular shaped cards, which just adds a little difference to the game. So we have been playing this one and we enjoy it, but it is not our favorite game these days. Let me show you our favorite game. This one is a memory game, so it's pretty simple. We've all played memory before, and I'm not sure why this one is a really big hit versus other games, except that maybe it's geared towards a wide variety of ages, rather than when you think of memory and you purchase a memory game, usually they have very young images on them. They're intended for preschool or kindergarten or first grade. But this one, even though some of them are pretty simple looking, well, actually they're all pretty simple looking, because this is something that we're doing with our unit for my 5th grader, even my 15-year-old, my 10th grader participated and really enjoyed it. And my 6-year-old also participated and really enjoyed it. So we all collectively played this game. It was a lot of fun. We really enjoyed it. It really got us more familiar with the constellations, which was great. And in addition to that, it comes with a little booklet that tells you a little bit of information about each of those constellations. So again, educational and academic and a lot of fun at the same time. That's just such a winner for me. Something else to note is that this is really good quality, nice, thick chipboard. It's really nicely illustrated. The back is also really nice. It comes with a lot of cards. It's fairly challenging, especially for me as an adult. I just don't have the same memory as I used to have. So the game takes about 15 to 20 minutes to play, and it's just a lot of fun. We really, really enjoyed this game. Another one that I am so pleased with, I love this product. This is Animals in the Stars, and it's a lacing game. So again, something that you would normally have for a really young student, but the content on this is geared towards an older student. So it comes with the lacing material, which is also, again, this whole product is such nice quality, really nice thick chipboard. It's nicely printed, and it's also glow in the dark, which is so neat. And then you can lace them. The numbers are on here. They're a little bit hard to see, but my 6-year-old was able to do this with no problem. When you're lacing them and you're following the pattern that is indicated by the numbers, you end up drawing the constellation with, connecting the stars in the same pattern that you would typically see when you're seeing constellations like this. You can see how the lines kind of connect the stars so that you can see the image. This does the same thing. So it's, again, fine motor skills. It's interesting, it's fun, it's academic. You can also turn out the lights and you can see the constellation. I really, really like this product for a couple of reasons, but not just because it's like such great quality, but also because it meets the needs of multiple students. And when you're in a homeschool environment, that is so key when you're putting together your unit studies or main lesson blocks, because you probably are going to have multiple students in multiple grades doing the unit study. And so when you can find material that's going to work for all of those ages, that's fantastic. Again, this is a simple project. When you're lacing, that is a simple project. But what I found is that having these things around for my younger student, but available for my older student, allows my older students to use these products and not feel like, oh, I'm using a baby product. So I don't know if that's ever a problem in your homeschool, but I find that it at least alleviates that, oh, I'm not going to use that product, or I'm not going to play that game. But so I like that for this reason. There you go. Constellation Connect is another game that's similar to the previous game that I showed you, the Night Sky Finder game. This is a Go Fish game as well, and you're trying to collect all of the constellations in a particular family. I believe you need to find 6 for each grouping. This game is great for all ages, even for young students who can't read. We did this and you have to modify the game a little bit, but you can, if your student can't read, or maybe can only read like the larger text and maybe not the smaller text, then your student can just say, do you have any in the light green family or in the pink or purple or orange family? And that way that student then, the other person has to give all of the cards in that family, versus a student can read, will just ask for a particular card in the family. So I know that might have not been that clear, but the point is that some of these games can easily be modified so they can meet the needs of multiple ages. And so this is another game that we really liked. It's different than the Night Sky Finder game because this one deals with all kinds of topics within astronomy, but this one deals with just the constellations. Okay, I have a couple more games I want to show you. The Professor Noggins games, if you haven't seen them on my channel, I'm sure that you've seen them. They are just fantastic trivia-based games. What's really great about these games, the first thing is that you get these beautifully illustrated cards, and they're really good quality. They're nice and thick. They're really good quality. And the other thing is that you have 2 sets of questions, an easy set and a hard set. And the way we play this a couple of different ways. The first way is that if I'm more familiar with the subject matter, I will do the hard questions while my students do the easy questions. Another way to do this is that at the beginning of your unit, you can go through the easy questions, and then at the end of the unit, you can go through the hard questions. The only problem with a trivia-based game is that over time, you will discover all the answers. And so unless you forget them, then it just becomes like obsolete to play the game because everybody knows the answers. It also comes with the little dice so that you can roll the dice and see what question you get. We really love these games for all of our units. It's a great way to kind of bring the students together in order to start the main lesson, and especially if the main lesson is going to have a lot of writing and drawing and it's going to be a little bit on the heavier side. Starting off with a game has always worked to get my kids in gear for the main lesson. Another game that we've had for ages, for so long that it still has Pluto as a planet, is Destination Mars. It's a strategy game. It's a fun game. It's fun. It's simple. It's competitive. It's only for 2 players, and you have these different cards, and you have to you receive maybe 6 cards or 4 cards per player, and then you have to combine them in order to get points, and then you move your little piece across the board. with those points. So it's fun. When we get into it, we really love playing it a lot, but it's kind of not super educational. It's more fun. This is actually not a game. It's called Celestial Seeker, and it is actually very nice. This one comes with these different cards that have the constellations on them, and then you slip it into this part right here, and then you probably can't see that. You're not going to be able to see that, but you push this button and it lights up, and you can, especially if you're outdoors, then you can see what the constellation is. It lights up with a little red light behind it. So we really like this one, and we haven't actually used it outside, but we do really like this game quite a bit. My kids mostly just use it indoors, which I know doesn't work for its purposes, but anyway, I want to show you another Constellation Finder. This one I believe is also glow in the dark, and it has the night sky for winter and for summer, I believe for the northern hemisphere, and then some more constellation cards. All right, so let me show you. Oh, I forgot to show you one book here. This one's called Patterns in the Sky, and we only just started reading this with our previous unit. We did not actually complete this book, and we may or may not do it this time around. This one also goes through the mythology behind the constellations, you know, how they got their names. And because we have other books that are similar to this, we may not get to it this time around. Okay, I want to show you a product that is awesome, but we've only done it once. And really, you don't need to do it more than once, except that we moved, and so we don't have it anymore. This is called Night Sky, and this is for the summer sky. And this comes with sheets of paper that are already pre-cut with the constellations, or with the night sky rather. So it comes with several sheets of paper, and what you do is you carefully take this all apart, and let me try to find a place that actually has it punched out. Okay, here you can see one spot that's punched out. Okay, and then let me show you a couple more. Gosh, this is going to be a little bit challenging. Okay, and then you can see two more here. And if it's not really discernible on camera, those are actually two different sizes, and then you can get to ones that are actually even smaller. So what you do is let me move this. You lay this out on your ceiling, which is difficult. You need to use a ton of tape. You put it out onto your ceiling, and then it comes with the little paintbrush and glow-in-the-dark paint, which we don't have anymore because we already used. And you actually paint your ceiling with the night sky, with the constellation. It was so difficult to do. Oh my goodness, it was so hard to do. But the results were amazing. They were awesome. But we moved from that home, and I really intended to do it again, but we've been in this home for almost 5 years and I haven't done it yet. So might not happen again, but I really want to show you this product because it was really fantastic. Such a unique product. I'm sorry that I can't remember where I got it from because it was so many years ago. But it's such a good idea to do this. Now, you could be haphazard about doing a night sky and just do glow-in-the-dark stars in whatever pattern you want. But doing them according to the actual constellations was really great. And so, you know, you just turn on the lights for maybe 10, 15 minutes and make sure that they get enough light. And then you switch them off. It's nice and dark. And then the whole ceiling just bursts into life. It is fantastic. So highly recommend this. However, you're gonna have to be really dedicated to the process. It took an entire day, I think, if I remember correctly, and it was not easy. You needed a ladder, lots of tape. It was just difficult to do. All right, so let me put this aside and show you some of the hands-on projects for this unit. The last things I want to show you are the astronomy kits. Now, the astronomy kits that you're going to find at Rainbow Resource are most likely going to be creation-oriented kits and not secular-based astronomy kits. And because we are with a charter school, we needed secular material for our science curriculum. So the original science kit that I purchased was from Rainbow Resource. It needed to be returned because it was creation based. So that's just something to think about when you are purchasing from different vendors. The science kits from Rainbow Resource most likely are all going to be creation based. This one is secular, so it does not have any religion attached to it, and all of the projects, if I remember correctly, they were a lot of fun to do. I'm pretty sure we completed all of them the first time around. Some of them we can do again, but some of the materials, they've already been used and we could just refer to the projects once they were done. This one was building like a little rover or a lander, if I remember correctly. So a lot of really creative projects that are just really a great way to get some hands-on activities into your unit. It also came with a book as well. There are other kits that I want to show you. We have two of these science in a nutshell kits. We have the moon kit and we also have the planet and stars kit. Now both of these kits were hand-me-down from another family. They have never been used and we haven't used them yet either. They do come with all the materials that you're going to need in order to do these various projects. I really like kits like that, especially when everything is already included. It makes doing some hands-on activities so much easier than trying to source all of these materials individually. And then this one is the Planet and Stars kit, and again comes with all the information that you'll need in order to do these projects. We haven't done any of these yet, but we may do them with this unit. Maybe not the Planet and Stars one, but we may do the one about the moon. There is one more kit that I want to show you that we will be doing this year, and it is by Nature Watch, and this is one of their classroom kits. We really have been enjoying the kits by Nature Watch. We mostly get the classroom kit, so this one has the materials for 25 students. Now sometimes the kits, even if you're just a homeschooling family, it makes sense to buy the classroom kit because then you can do multiple projects like growing the seeds or the pine tree, or we did the amber kit recently and it was nice having enough samples that we could do 2 or 3 projects with. This one, however, probably will only be good for one. Like, I don't think my kids are going to want to do this project multiple times. It's different than some of their other science kits that kind of lend themselves well to doing multiple projects. So we are going to have a lot of leftovers to share with other homeschooling families, but this is a classroom kit to show the different phases of the moon, and this will work really well with our astronomy unit. Okay, so as promised, I want to show you the main lesson books and projects that we've done in the previous years with our astronomy unit. So let me go from the most recent, and that is this main lesson book. Now, this main lesson book is new to us. It has the white pages and it has the blue pages. And the way that we use this one, since we just finished part 1 of this main lesson block, is that I would read the stories for the constellations out of our astronomy main lesson book. So this one came with all the content that we needed. And in general, you're supposed to pre-read the lesson first and then orally tell the story to the students. But in general, since I am not quite that prepared, I generally just read the content directly out of the curriculum, which has worked fine so far. You will need an additional resource when you get to, I believe, Hercules and his 12 labors, and we just used our Greek mythology book for that. Then we went ahead and my son drew in the constellations on the blue paper. We weren't quite sure how this was going to work out, but what we ended up doing was he would just use pencil to draw out the constellation. And then we used some whiteout. He put whiteout on each of the spots, and then he used a white color pencil to connect them. And in some cases, he would even just draw out the outline of the constellation as well. For our previous main lesson block on astronomy, we had one major project, and then also we had a main lesson book. So the last time we did this unit, my 11-year-old was only about 8, and my 15-year-old was about 12. So my 15-year-old was actually doing the curriculum more accurately at the time. And at the time, we went through both sections. So the main lesson books that he has here actually represent more closely the second section of the main lesson block. And so he has a lot more math going on with this particular part of the unit, and then a lot of writing as well. So he did really well with this particular unit. Some of the concepts they got a little bit complicated, and he really managed them really well. For this unit as well, we focused on Galileo, and we decided to do an interactive Galileo astronomy book. And so actually, it wasn't just on Galileo. I apologize. It was on multiple astronomers of the past. So I went ahead and I made this book, and then the kids filled it in. And I made the cover just using some chipboard, and I covered it with some paper. And then I went ahead and I bound the inside of the book using a binding technique. Then I used my Silhouette Cameo in order to make a lot of these different interactive pieces. Now, this was a huge commitment. It took at least a solid week and probably overflowed into the second week of just working on this project for the majority of our homeschool day. We did do other lessons, like math and some grammar, but the concentration of our time was solely dedicated to this, in part because I need to spend so much time assembling the book. The kids, then we had to do the lessons. The kids did their rough drafts, and then they did their final drafts, and then they did all of the art and the movable, bits that go in this book. I do have a video flip through of the book, but I don't have any video tutorials on how we did this. This is definitely an involved, slightly complicated project, so I don't recommend it unless you are really into this kind of stuff. I mean, we even did like a little extra book in here on the book that Galileo wrote, and then I think this one, nope, it's not sealed, and then the letters that he wrote to Kepler, and then some of the discoveries that Kepler made about the orbits, and then Tycho Brahe as well, and Galileo's telescope, and then these moons are movable, so that, that's what he discovered, is that these dark spots on Jupiter must be moons. Then the book that Galileo wrote, Starry Night, and then the year that they saw 3 comets in the sky. I think there's supposed to be 3. And then we have the sunspots, and we have the sun kind of rotating, and then the pendulum clock, and then finally the death of Galileo. So this was, at the time, my 12-year-old's book, and then my 8-year-old did one as well, and so he did less writing, but he still covered all the same topics. And this was not my intention to have him do things that were quite as complicated, but he copied what his older brother was doing. And you can see that the content is quite a bit less. He was 8 at the time, so sometimes it's just like 1 or 2 sentences. It's not quite to the same academic level as his older brother. All right, something else that we did using the Silhouette Cameo was make our own zodiac star or constellation finders. and that was kind of fun. And then we also worked on the elliptical orbit that Kepler discovered, and the 3 laws of Kepler, basically. One other thing that we did with our previous unit was to make these constellation little cards. So instead of doing the constellations in a main lesson book the way my son did this time around, oops, that wasn't the right main lesson book. It was this one. So in this one, he wrote about these different constellations and then drew the pictures here. But the last time what we did was we watercolored paper and then cut it down to size. We used glow-in-the-dark paint in order to do the constellations. I cut out the titles using my Silhouette Cameo, and then on the inside we printed, like my kids wrote all of this, but I just went ahead and I printed it for them rather than having them write it, because there was so much content. If they were going to write it, it would only be like, with this small space, they could probably only fit a sentence or two, but this is all their original writing. I just went ahead and I typed it up for them. And so they did this. Let's see, we have a lot of them in here. Oops. Not all of them have Ryan inside. Here they are. And so that was a really nice, again, involved project that we did. And we have extra watercolor paper and extra titles if we wanted to continue and do this again this year and not go through the whole process again. We could totally do that as well. I do not have a video on this, and this is just one way that you could do it. I'm sure you could simplify this project a little bit too by not doing the printing, print it out on your computer. You could just write out 1 or 2 sentences and also just do your constellation on the outside. Okay, one more astronomy main lesson book. This is from my oldest son. So I've got 3 sons and a daughter, and the main lesson books that I've shown you now have been from my 2 younger sons. This one is from my oldest son when we did this unit, and you can see that his cover page really resembles the cover page on the main lesson book. And then he went ahead and did his narrations and his drawings on one side in a more typical style of main lesson book. And he was probably 11 or 12 at the time, so he had moved into using a fountain pen. So at this time we were following the curriculum a little bit more closely. I really like the way that he designed his drawings with his narrations with his drawings and his tables, and I really like the way that his main lesson book turned out. He did make a mistake here. Sometimes this happens, not a big deal. He wrote them upside down. It is sometimes a problem just because of the way the main lesson books are made. You sometimes forget which direction that you're going in. However, what you can do when a mistake like this happens is either leave it the way it is, which we did in this case, or you can take a fresh, clean sheet of paper and then just glue it on top. If you catch your mistake early enough, then you can just glue a new piece of paper on top and then just continue with your main lesson book. Okay, I think those are all the materials that we have used. Don't forget to check back with me at the end of this unit so that you can get a complete review of the materials that we have used and how we like them. Because we are doing this as a smaller unit, we do not have as many additional tutorial videos to go along with this unit. I am combining all of the lessons and projects and tutorials that we have for astronomy into one playlist that is linked here on the screen. You can take a look at that to see some of the projects that we have done that coordinate with this main lesson block as well as this astronomy unit study. And don't forget that you can find me on a daily basis by visiting me on Instagram at Pepper and Pine.